Large cappuccino. Orders up. Okay, we have a exciting episode of the Athlete Cafe today. This month we are doing a little bit different style. We're going to do some interviews. We figured we'd switch it up. And, when we interviewed Tim Mack a couple of months ago, it's a little bit while ago, it was really cool to hear other people's perspectives on, their sport journey, how they've translated that into their life outside of sports and their careers, whatever it is. So for our first guest this year, we have Gideon Goff, also my husband. So, yeah, thank you. I know it was funny when we were thinking about who would be good to have on this. Our idea was to have lots of different people who come from different types of backgrounds. Mm-hmm. We all have our sports that we do, so it was very easy for us to be let me just pull in, one of my friends that did gymnastics or coaches gymnastics. Everybody kind of started thinking of people in their realm, and then we realized, let's branch out to something similar or adjacent, but slightly different. And so, obviously I know you have kind of a cool sport background, a now cool coaching background, and just a very unique, athletic experience. So do you want to tell us a little bit? I know most of the answers to the questions I'm going to ask you.
Yeah,
so
no, I usually just let you speak for me on what I do and everything. So.
Yeah, mostly because he will introduce what he does, and then everybody looks at me and says, "How do you allow that to happen?"
Yeah, they have all the extra questions. I'll just kind of get my point across.
Yep, and then most questions are directed at me. So give us a little bit about your background, who you are, where you come from.
Well, thank you for having me on. Thank you for inviting me over. Thank you to Emily for approving this.
Yeah, right.
Thank you to my boss who's covering my toddler and me class right now.
We love you, Kristen.
Yes.
And Chrissy.
I think Chrissy's actually doing it today.
Oh, Chrissy and Kristen.
But both of the Chris's are wonderful. Yeah, so I come from a parkour background. Mm-hmm. For those that don't know what parkour is,
go look up The Office. You'll figure it out real quick.
Look it up. I don't know how it's really it's become a little bit more of a evolved thing. Mm-hmm. It's very similar to skateboarding, where it's kind of started a bit more underground and then kind of gotten through popularity, and then there's different styles and skills of it. But for the purposes of what I do for the most part, whenever I'm talking about something that I'm doing, I just picture jumping off of one thing and landing on another thing. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the best way to kind of put yourself in that perspective of it. It's like gymnastics, but outside, and you're not told what to do.
Yeah. Or if you're my dad, you just say he jumps off buildings, which is not entirely wrong.
It's not wrong. Yeah.
It's not entirely wrong.
Right.
So,
but a lot of times I'm also trying to land on something, and then the thing that I'm jumping on, I also have to get off of that. So it's just, keep myself safe. But how much background do you want from me?
Well, how did you, figure out either what parkour is or decide that, that was kind of the route you were going to go? I think a lot of it had to do with where you grew up, that kind of situation.
I kind of grew up in the middle of nowhere. In high school, we always lived in the country. There's not really a lot going on. My mom was working all the time, so I just was kind of in the woods, just kind of making my own entertainment. And inherently, even as a kid, I was always playing on the outside of the playground, kind of doing my own thing. I wasn't playing tag with everybody else. I wasn't playing a sport. I was just kind of doing my own thing, playing around. And then I saw whenever somebody does parkour that's around my age, they find it from YouTube. It's what's the video that you saw that was your first parkour video that made you want to go outside and do it? I don't remember what mine was specifically. If I saw it's some compilation video, if I saw the thumbnail, I could be that's the one.
Yeah.
And I was that's basically what I'm doing. So I just kind of started jumping off of stuff, and I was probably 10 when I started doing that. And I turned 26 this year, so
I feel that's pretty similar to how a lot of kids find their sport. I know, you'll get to this, but you coach gymnastics. That's kind of how we met, even was in the gymnastics world. But, how many little girls have you heard, well, I saw Simone Biles at the Olympics and then I wanted to do gymnastics? Mm-hmm. Or even with other sports that I see, well, my dad played baseball and he loved it, so he got me into softball. Or my big sister played lacrosse, so I played lacrosse, right? It's that idea where you see something that you look up to, you see somebody doing something you think is cool, and you're I want to do that. And so yours just happened to be with parkour, which maybe would have led you to gymnastics, but because, you had a mom who was working, you had a brother that had to be taken care of, like,
oh yeah, there was no
couldn't get to gymnastics, so let's just go flip off the deck in the backyard.
Yes, we definitely didn't have resources to an open gym or anything like that in our area. I think I did research, and like the closest one was like 3 hours away, so like nothing close by. So it's just like old mattresses that like my buddy would find from his apartment complex, and he would bring over, and we had.
Was that Nate?
Yeah, that was Nate, and then we had our deck that we could jump off of, and I really believe that like most people have like an inherent desire to play in some way, whether it's like, a habit that they have of like something that they enjoy, or just like, whatever sport or game or activity they like to do in their free time, their hobby. Like there's always something that like we're looking to do to just like scratch that itch and like have that passion, that spark in our life.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of like, that's what resonated with me, and like what I was already doing, playing as with my body, with movement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. So when, there are days, a lot of kids that will watch this are parents that are used to, more traditional organized sports. Parkour is becoming more organized in certain realms, right? I know USA Gymnastics now kind of has a subsection of parkour. They have USA Parkour. So in some situations, it's becoming a little more organized. There's competitions, like what was the big one in Greece?
Yeah, the Red Bull Art of Motion.
Red Bull Art of Motion, right? Like I remember that was like a big thing. It's
Red Bull's been a big advocate, kind of been sparking more of a professional aspect with parkour. Also very similar to skateboarding, where when skateboarding started, it was just some underground thing that kids were doing to get themselves in trouble.
Right.
And now it's more of a thing where you can go to the Olympics, you can be a professional skateboarder from clothing brands, you can sell merchandise. There's so many different opportunities for it now that there weren't before. Parkour is the same way, where there's gyms and there's sponsors and there's certain things that you can do to get to higher levels, but it's not something you can get a scholarship for.
Right.
So it's not exactly, you have the kids that you're graduating high school with that, graduated honors, but they also, played soccer, and they did, theater, and they did all these other extracurricular activities. And it's like, well, I do parkour. It's like, okay, great. Like, what are you going to do? What are you going to
do with that?
Right.
Yeah.
And do you want to be a stuntman? No, because I don't want to do, organized fighting. Like, that's not what I'm trying to do.
That's not what you want to do. So what does like a normal day of training look like when it's not in that traditional sport realm? Like how do you prep for that? What do you do?
So
what does that look like?
I really just love parkour because it's something that I can put into my life any other time, and I can take aspects of my life and put that back into parkour as well.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what was the original question? Because I just
like, what is like a traditional day of training?
Normal day of parkour, if I'm going to go out on like
if you're,
a weekend.
Yeah, it's not we're walking through, we're walking outside and we're, going shopping, and I'm looking at all the stores and all the clothes in the stores, and Gideon's looking up.
And I'm looking
and
up.
He's always looking for what building can I climb onto to jump over. And it's funny because now that's how I look.
You can spot some stuff
right?
too.
It's really funny, and I can be like, oh, that'd be a good challenge. Like that would be cool. And then it's one of those like, I'll look at him, I see the look in his eyes, and I'm like, give me your phone, I'll record it, you get one shot kind of thing. But what does a typical day of training look like for you?
I'm gonna loop back to this last weekend that I went training.
That's a good example.
Because the way that I like to train is I like to have a mission in mind. Mm-hmm. There's usually like a big thing that I'm training for, and it's not, I'm not gonna go out and every day try to hit that mission. That's something that on a more casual day, I'm gonna do some reps of some smaller jumps that are very similar to the big jump, where I'm trying to practice like a soft landing, or I'm trying to do the flip, or I'm trying to spot where I'm going. I'm visualizing, I'm doing these little repetitions. The day before, I'm going to be thinking of the challenge. I'm going to be thinking of it over and over in my head, POV, kind of how I'm going to, like what it's going to look like as I'm doing it. Mm-hmm. The day of, I try to get a good night's sleep. I try to make sure I'm hydrated. I'll go out. As I'm going out, I'll try to visualize the big things before I warm up. Yeah. There's the warm up. I get ready. I'm doing things to make sure that my body's ready, and then it gets me into the challenge that I'm going for. Do you want me to go into like my process for the for a challenge yet?
In a minute, we'll get to it. But
go through the more of a summary of the day.
Yeah, because what I like that you're pointing out is that it's not a traditional sport. It's not, okay, show up at practice at 9, you got to get your gear on, you got to get warmed up and stretch and go. But you follow a very similar process to, if you're going to hit a big challenge that day, it's like you're treating it as like the big game day. So you're, the day before, you're starting to get mentally prepped. The night before, you're making sure you get a good night's sleep. You're making sure that you're eating. You're making sure that you're hydrating. And then when you get there, you're going through the traditional or needed, maybe not traditional, but like the necessary process of getting your body warmed up. So it's, it's so different from, what do you got to go to, play a football game, but you
Absolutely.
follow a pretty general athletic structure to
and
that.
I want to come back more to like why I do that, but I think that's tricky because I know that the way that I do it isn't how everybody else in parkour does it, and whether that's good or bad for them personally and what they like to do or what I like to do. Because you don't have that coach that tells you like, hey guys, like make sure you have like, pasta the night before and have like oatmeal in the morning. Make sure you have some cereal. Like, there are people that will, wake up at 11 and they'll just like wake up and roll out of bed and they'll rock up to the spot and they'll and I've been there for those things. And when I want to do that jump that day that I've been thinking of and getting ready for the past 2 years that I've seen it. And then I don't feel good that day. Like I feel tired. I want to feel when I get there, I want to feel as primed and as ready as possible.
Yeah.
However, when I first started, I didn't want to like have to treat myself like an athlete. Like, okay, like I like it because I can just do it offhandedly whenever I want. Like I don't have to wait for the after school for, the 3 hours at the gym and be told exactly how to do it. Like, no, like if I want to do a bunch of side flips that day, I'm going to do a bunch of side flips. If I want to do a bunch of jumps off of the deck, like I'm going to go off my deck. Like I don't have to let and that was kind of just the attitude that I had as a kid. And then it helped and hindered me. It gave me that time when I needed in my free time or during like a low time, just as a teenager feeling angsty or whatever, like I had that outlet to get my energy out and do what I wanted to do whenever I could. Like I didn't have to wait for that time to be able to do it.
Right.
Especially over COVID with, I don't know if you can say COVID, sorry. Especially over lockdown with quarantine, I remember feeling very thankful that I could still do what I loved when a lot of kids couldn't get to a gym. And that was devastating for a lot of people. But also like, I tore my rotator cuff in my shoulder because I would throw double flips in the winter without any sort of warm up.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, I wonder why that happened.
No coach would ever let a kid do. It's like, hey man, like why don't you do some jumping jacks first? Like you're gonna wake up and so now like when I am like I'm so excited for this thing that I want to do that I want to feel as good as possible going into it, and then I also know that I'm committed to a whole day. I'm not going to be there for the one thing. Like I have literally 8 hours left in the day of sunshine that I want to feel good for afterwards as well. Where I want to hit this big thing and I still want to feel good afterwards
to be able to go do other things. Yeah, it's interesting, and I think that's just part of your evolution as a parkour athlete. Where like before it was like I don't want it to be structured. Then I think just knowing you and kind of your journey with it, you sometimes would fling too far in the other direction where you became too structured. And now I feel like you found like a pretty good common ground where there's things where you need it to be really structured, maybe some of those bigger challenges. There's different online competitions where you have to submit a clip and you want it to be, the biggest, best thing that you've done recently, right? A clip that nobody's ever seen before. So you take that more seriously. But then all those other little things you can kind of, I don't want to say haphazardly, but there's a lot less structure and planning. And part of parkour is just making things up as you go and kind of doing this add-on game I know you do with your friends and like all of that stuff. So there's different times for it to be structured and different times for it to be unstructured, which I think is what most sports want to do or they try to do, right? You have the most extreme form of structured, sports up to the, Olympic elite level. And then you've got like your backyard pickup games. Like you can have all different sorts of things, and it's, it does mirror so many more quote unquote traditional sports depending on what you want to do with it and what like needs to be or should be done that day.
It reminds me of gymnastics with team where during meet season they're doing their competition, they're going through the routines of what they're doing, and then over the summer they're doing upgrades. It's kind of the same thing. And I think like when people ask me how long I've been training for, it's kind of a hard question because I've had phases of like different goals. Where like when I first started training, I was just kind of, when I first knew what parkour was and I was imitating it, it was kind of just like aimless and I was jumping off of stuff and I was hurting my back because I wasn't rolling when I was jumping, and I was, just doing all these little things that was just kind of just kid playing as more than parkour. But then once I got to like 13, I met my friend Nate, and he was doing front handsprings like off of the handrail at the laundromat. Like he was doing similar stuff. And that's when I started like actually like wanting to learn how to do a front flip. Like I was like, I just want to be able to do I want someone to be able to say like, do a flip, and I can do a front flip right away. Like that was just like 13-year-old Gideon. Like that was like the height dream. Of cool. So like 13 through 15, I was getting that front flip. And then once I got the front flip, then like 15 on is really when I was like, okay, like there's so much more to this.
It's like, more than just that.
And then like I took training seriously more as I got like older, like once we met, and like I could like I would lift and I would eat healthier, and I looked at all of that stuff outside as contributing factors to, and then that also just helps me with life in general.
Yeah, right. It's cool just how like you've built such a process for training around it, and it took a lot of years, I would say 10 plus years for you to like really get that down, feel comfortable in that and feel like you know how to prepare for some of these bigger things that we're doing. And we're going to post a couple of your clips because, you're doing more than just front flips right now. Like you're doing, big things that, the little old ladies that are walking by always roll their eyes at, or people look at me and they're like, how the heck do you let him do that? And it's so funny. The second we got married, everybody was like, oh, soon as you get married, he's going to have to stop that. And I'm like, no, like, why would I do that? So, it's interesting because I've seen you. And really the reason it doesn't make me nervous is because I've seen you walk up to something and you're like, I want to hit that challenge. And I've seen you prep for it for literally years sometimes, get there that day and just be like, it's not going to happen today. Like something feels off. My body doesn't feel right. Something about this. I'm just not physically or mentally prepared for this today. And you don't like to walk away from it, but you will walk away from it if that's what the situation calls for. So I want to go into like what your mental prep is, right? Because we talk about, how do we get these athletes mentally prepared for, big regionals, gymnastics regionals are happening this weekend for a lot of girls, how do you get ready for, tryouts, like trying to get all of these things, like how do I mentally prepare to do what I need to do? So one of the big things that comes to mind for me immediately, a couple of things, is all the preps that you do and how you know your kind of limit of distance and you'll prep that. You will find something similar on a smaller scale. And then, the most important one that I think I want you to touch on is your 1, 2, 3, go and what that kind of means. So kind of wherever you feel like starting with all of that, and then we can circle back.
Yeah. So I think like, and I'm sure anybody can say it about any hobby, like parkour, I love it because it's simple, because it doesn't need to be a lot. And when you're going for that one thing, that's the only thing that you can be thinking of. Yeah. You can't be having other thoughts going on in your head. You can't be stressed. There can't be anxiety. There can't be adrenaline. You're talking about the little old lady seeing me do it. People will assume that I'm jumping off of rooftops as an adrenaline junkie. I don't want adrenaline. Yeah. I've had times where I'm getting myself to like, I'll be halfway through my mental process of about to get myself to send it, and I'll feel the adrenaline come in, and I'll be like, okay, like I need to take a minute to like walk away and breathe before I come back to it, because like I don't want that adrenaline going into it. Or like if you do it one time and then come back to it again and you have it, it's like, okay, like I gotta make sure that. Yeah. But being mentally ready, you want to turn everything off, and that can be tough, especially with parkour. It's not a contained environment. Yeah. Where I'm out on the streets, where there's people walking by yelling to do a flip. There's cars. There's people who might not love what I'm doing. They might assume that I'm trying to hurt myself on purpose. They might think that I'm trying to do damage to something. Yeah. They might just not like what I'm doing.
Whatever it is. So it's like you know, in gymnastics, it's one of those, when you're there to do gymnastics, everybody knows that that's what you're doing. Everybody's pretty on board with what you're doing. Right. For you, you're out, with people who don't know what parkour is. So you can get 95%, get ready to send it. And then somebody just on the street will yell something, and then you have to start that process all over again.
And I have social anxiety. Like I go out and I hear that noise all of the time anyway. Yep. So when you're trying to be hyper focused and lock yourself into this thing, and then it's just like all these other things are going on. So that's tough. And then when you're around other people too that which is really helpful, especially when I'm doing bigger challenges. I like to say that I like to bring people with me. Like I like to have people there. It's like, oh yeah, so you have somebody to like shovel you off the ground when you fall. It's like, no,
Yes, but
no,
yeah.
it's part of it is like a grounding thing where it's like I have other people there to be like, okay, yeah, like I can see you jumping to that.
Yeah.
Like I can picture it, so like I'm on board with that.
Yeah.
And it kind of helps just like ground me in the situation of just like, okay, like this is like a real viable, like it's
This
not
is doable.
it's not like outer worldly, it's not out of hand. Like this is just it's just one thing. It's just a jump. It's just a jump.
Yeah.
And so I'll do what I can to kind of quiet myself down and focus on what I'm doing. I go through those repetitions. I do my physical preps. I make sure that my body feels ready. I'll stop my feet really hard on the ground because that shouldn't be any harder than what it feels like when I jump to it. I want to like make sure that my, I'm all warm. I'll do some breathing. You've talked to me about that. It's funny because like we just like offhandedly will talk about certain things.
Oh, yeah.
And I try not to like, oh, like, hey, Coach Abbie, like you want to help me with this thing after your shift?
Yeah, it's really interesting that, a lot of times what you naturally have learned how to do, there's a name for it in the world of mental performance. So he'll, come back home from a long day and he's like, hey, do you want to see this clip? And I see him, getting his feet into the ground. I see him taking his deep breaths and I'm sitting there being like, okay, he's mimicking the landing. He's getting that feeling into his body. Like that is something that we tell our athletes to do where, walk through the motions of your swing, tap your feet in the direction or do everything on a smaller scale. Then it's, we encourage our athletes, okay, you need to drop your heart rate. You need to drop that adrenaline, take those deep breaths, right? And so it's so interesting that he's talking about all these things and I'm like, okay, that's called box breathing or that's called, progressive muscle relaxation. Like I can
squaring up. Yep. When I like walk up to like see it and I didn't realize it until somebody took a picture of me and I'm like puffing my chest out. I'm like, what am I doing?
And
but
you're
I'm like
doing that good body language and that confident
like
power
confident
poses.
stance to,
And it's so funny. And a lot of times I'm like, do you want to know why that works? Or do you want it to just be parkour right now? And, I often can turn off, my mental performance coach brain and just be, someone who's interested in parkour, but it's very cool that, we oftentimes have those, there's a name for it and here's why it works. And you often want that answer, but
it's good. It's good. When you first brought it to my attention of like knowing why can really help you with it, it was a bit overwhelming for me because the first time I found myself in a tense situation, and I try to save these things for the big ones. Yeah. But I found myself for the first time after we had a conversation thinking about it, and it was a bit overwhelming of like, okay, like there's a lot that goes into it that I wasn't thinking about. Yeah. But then getting through that and using it more and more and having it become a routine, it becomes so much stronger. Yeah. Because you can go like, okay, like when I feel my heart beating, I need to like I just need to like get that air out. And at first I was thinking like, oh, like I'm just like, I'm breathing the fear out. Like that's how I looked at it as I was just like get it out of me. And that's what it felt like. Yeah. And that, like my heart rate would drop and like, yeah, like of course. And like I'll even, because normally I'll just do like a, and that's enough. But then if I'm still feeling it, I'll have to I'll like as much push out of oxygen as I can before I can take that big breath in. Stomping my feet, squaring up to it. So I'll get as close as I can to it without actually doing it and like really look at it as if I'm about to jump. Physical, like if I'm flipping, I'll do like the arm motions and like the tuck and I'll like extend to where my feet are going to be looking. I keep going away from the mic. And then making sure that physically I'm ready, knowing that 100% physically I have it. Yeah. Which is funny because that's when it becomes hard. Yeah. Because you go like, oh, now I got to actually do it. Like it's on, it's there. So now I got to do it. And I'll tell anybody at jams or anything when I'm doing parkour with other people that do parkour, parkourist, if you will. That's the word that we're trying to use right now. I'll tell them my wife is a mental performance coach and they'll go, oh, like that sounds awesome. Like I would love a mental, because that's what parkour is for the most part is like it's knowing that you can physically do it, but how do you get yourself to do it? Exactly. And that's typical for most athletes. And I like kind of how you were phrasing it is you were doing these things naturally and you had attached your own meaning to them, which I think is awesome. And that's what we always tell like these kids to do that we work with is
here's the information, here's it from my perspective, how do we make it your own, right? So let's talking about the breathing part of it, like I know that when your body is getting yourself ready to physically go, it's going to jack your heart rate. It's going to make your breathing change because it's trying to get more blood and oxygen circulating through your body, trying to get you ready to go, all of those things. Like that's a very biological response to it. But for you, you're like, okay, I'm going to take that deep breathing. And for me, it is mentally feeling that fear leaving my body. And it's one of those things that like there's so many reasons it works, and you took it and you twisted it into your own. But what's cool about knowing why it works, you always knew that it worked. You didn't know necessarily why it worked. But now that you do know why and you understand that, you can do it so much more intentionally. You do it so it's not just, oh, by accident, I took a couple deep breaths and then I felt ready to go hit it. Like, you know now why. And I think that is, what we tell these athletes all the time, right? You have all these skills, you have all of these techniques. We just want you to be able to use them intentionally and do it on purpose. And that is something that, especially since from when I first met you and like got introduced to this world of parkour, I've seen you. And I think just like the world of parkour in general, everybody's starting to really understand, I can actually really control this in a way that I never thought I could before. And it's cool to see you like put a meaning behind it and then do it on purpose.
I think a big assumption is that I'm not scared.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same with like adrenaline junkie.
Yeah.
It's like, no, like I'm terrified.
I just really know what to do with it, and I know how to control it or use it to my benefit.
Sure.
And I think the biggest example, and you're going to have to fill in some of the details on this, because I remember it was like very early on when I started actually, it's going to sound so bad, when I actually started caring about parkour, because at the first I was like, yeah, that's really cool. And then I was like, wait, this is actually really dope. Like, is when Dom hit
IMAX, the Kong front pre.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's so funny. Like, I remember the first time really understanding, like, obviously that was a huge challenge, but he worked up to that.
He did.
For how many years?
At least 2.
Right. And so he had to prep mentally. He had to prep physically. Like, he had a lot of people telling him like, hey, this is totally doable. And he had a lot of people that was like, heck no, that is not possible. Like, he literally had somebody at the bottom ready to catch him, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like,
it's pretty amazing. I think he's back to being the most followed parkour athlete on Instagram.
Yeah.
Dom Tomato. Kong front pre, so is behind the wall, hits his hands on the wall, does a front flip over the wall, lands on another wall.
Yeah.
He's done them to like on and off of handrails. He's done them like he started off of curbs, obviously, and like worked his way up. And then it was over quarantine. Like he wanted to get to England quicker, but couldn't. And he actually, before he did the one that he was dreaming of, he did a harder one in his hometown.
Yeah.
And it was like, instead of it being a full wall, it was just an electrical box.
Yeah.
So instead of being able to spot the entire wall, he only had to spot this thin, he had to land on this thin part of it. And it was actually like, it was less consequential and less iconic of a spot, but it was more consequential. It was harder, so that when he got to the real one, he was like even more confident for it.
Right.
But then IMAX is in England. It's the home of parkour. Like that's where it was. That's when parkour was first discovered by David Bell in the early 2000s. And like that's like one of the most iconic spots in parkour. So to be able to do one of the biggest moves at that spot and to be able to level it up to do something that no one's ever even thought of doing. But that was a really big moment. There's a really awesome documentary on YouTube about it.
Yeah, it was cool. I actually really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And I took a lot of inspiration from that. And there was a lot of things from that I had never really thought of before. And that was kind of when I realized that I had a lot of similarities to Dom, where we have similar like sparks in parkour, where like we have certain things that we like to, or we're drawn towards. We have certain challenges that we like. And then to be able to kind of take the way that he looks at challenges and physically how he trains and all of that, to be able to apply that to what I'm doing was really helpful. I want to talk about 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, I was going to say, because that I think is where I first saw that. And I think it was in that documentary where I can like hear it in his voice. He was like, I don't know if he goes 3, 2, 1 or 1, 2, 3, but it's 3, 2, 1, go. And that's I'm counting myself in. And I think the gymnasts out there, like how your coaches have told you, pull up tall, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3. And when I say 3, you need to go. But I remember him saying it's like it's this idea of building trust within yourself that I know I have the skill, I know I have the mental prep, but I just need to trust all of that. And so I remember him saying, you know, if you're going to 3, 2, 1, go, if you're going to say that, you have to go when you say go.
Right.
Because if you just kind of haphazardly say 3, 2, 1, go, and then you don't go, you're not building that trust in what you say you're going to do and what you actually do. And I think that is huge for athletes, regardless of sport, regardless of context, regardless of what you are training for, is when you tell yourself you're going to do it, you do it.
You need to have that thing that you can be able to lock into, that you can believe in, that you can trust. Because I'm still scared when I am actually doing the jump. It's that, okay, I know that I've done all my checks and balances and I know that I have it. So I just need to, if I find myself in the situation where I believe that I'm there and I am ready to say 3, 2, 1, I believe in myself at that point. And I've heard people say like, well, like when I jump and I'm in the air, that's when I freak out. It's like, no, like when I'm in the air, like that's when I know that I'm
right.
in.
I've already committed because I've done it all. And it's that last signal to yourself is 3. And it's funny, in a lot of clips I see you post and, you know, you just show me is it's when I start that video, you know, it's funny. I always am like, when you're out training, can you just send me videos? And it's 1, because I want to see what you're doing. 2, can you please
it's not really, you don't care about you don't care about
no,
the
I
video
don't really
all.
care what you're doing. It's just if I'm getting a video, it means you're in one piece. If I'm getting a phone call, it's not going well. That's what I've learned. But it's funny when that video starts, like I don't know if you're out doing something big, but if all of a sudden I hear 3 and then you start counting down, I'm like, whatever he just did, it's big. And I know it's going to be, you know, something that you've been working for, because you don't do it unless you know that it is the appropriate situation and you know you are going.
And you save it for the big one. I don't do this routine on every little jump that I do. I don't count 3, 2, 1 before I do every jump. You save it for the big one. And that's funny too, because 3, 2, 1 is a learned part of my routine. And it started with filming. Yeah. Because it's like you see somebody that's like almost ready to go, and they could be going now, they could be going in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'm going to call him out so hard, Alec. This is Gideon's best man at our wedding, so I feel I am fully valid of calling him out. I love you so much. And he's gotten better at it, I will say. But I remember, like, even like when like Alec is...
3, 2, 1. 3. It's like, okay, like...
Right, but I mean, Alec is...
He's gotten
talented beyond belief. We'll, you know, see if we can kind of...
And very well trained.
And, you know, a beast of a human being. And like... But I think that's just something where he has another process.
But he gets in his head.
Yeah, and he knows that, and that's why we're willing to kind of call him out a little bit. And he has another process where, you know, for you stomp your feet, and then maybe you'll stomp your feet again, and then maybe you'll stomp your feet again.
I wipe my shoes a lot. I'll check the surfaces, and I'll wipe them down, even though I haven't touched it.
Right, and it's just one of those, like, that's your kind of, I don't want to call it like your nervous habit, or just your kind of of course. Jitters getting out. That's
I noticed too in videos, I'll like wipe my hands.
Oh yeah,
that's not conscious, but that's just
right.
That's
and I
definitely
think,
something
you know,
that I do
it's
every time.
Alec, you know, with his 3, 2, 1, you know, whatever. But I think it's just also a good point to say, like, you know, you make it your own, you figure out what works, and you've done a really good job of knowing that. And for you, it's 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, and so 3, 2, 1 for me, it started for the person filming. It's like, okay, when I say 1, like go, because that's when I'm going to be going. Yeah. And then it became, okay, 3, 2, 1 is the time of commit. Like when I start to say 3, 2, 1, like that's when I'm going for the thing. And then I noticed recently with challenges that scare me is I'll say 3, 2, 1, and I am committed, but it'll still like 10 seconds in between the 1 and me actually going. And you can tell that I'm like getting myself into that spot and I'm there and I'm about to go. But I was like, okay, like I got to cut that time down because I'm keeping myself in that place of stress for way too long.
Longer than you want to.
Where it's like, okay, 3, 2, I'm going on 1.
Yeah. And I think that's, you know, what's cool about, you know, athletics in general, or just sports, or, you know, physical movement in general, is that you are constantly developing, you're constantly growing. And so you can have this really great, you know, even from a mental standpoint, like I think a lot of the things you do before you do a big challenge are really well done, very good. They can always be better. And that's where, you know, if you've listened to these episodes or if you worked with us, like, you know that we're not ever saying what you're doing is wrong, but it can always be better. You can always grow. You can always change. And this is where, I want to make sure we get to this question because it's my favorite thing that you are asked. And I think it's really important for athletes to kind of think about it is, why are you trying to get better, right? And so you get asked a lot, and it's so funny. It's always by like the really, really sweet older people or police a lot of times, honestly. You interact with the police a lot, and it's 99% of the time very, very positive interactions.
If the officer doesn't get a phone call about me, they don't care what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But if they get a phone call, they're like, okay, like I'm going to take your information because I got a phone call. So I got to do what I got to, like, I'm just doing my job.
Right,
like I'm doing my thing. You're doing your thing.
Exactly. And
we can have a cordial interaction.
Exactly.
And like, if they have to kick me off the spot because like, okay, like I have to ask you to leave or they're going to keep calling.
Right.
Or I have to ask you to leave.
You want to do your job, but he has to do his. So, before we get off that tangent, because we could talk about that for a long time,
Yes.
You get this question a lot. What are you training for?
Mm-hmm.
That is a lot of times what people are asking, why are you doing this? Like, why are you jumping off of things? What are you training for?
A valid question.
Yeah. But you always have sometimes you have like a very quick answer to it.
So when we lived in New York, I never got that.
Mm-hmm.
I never got, what are you training for? And I don't know if it was the environment. I don't know if it was like Ithaca. Like they were just like, okay, like,
I was going to say, we also were in a college town,
yeah.
like a super big college town.
It wasn't weird to see somebody walking barefoot. It wasn't weird to see somebody standing on a wall.
No,
it wasn't weird to see somebody
Ithaca,
juggling.
10 square miles surrounded by reality. Truer words have never been spoken. But you've gotten a lot since we've moved.
But then like
to Cleveland.
like somebody will see me doing a jump outside of a bagel shop and I'll be doing the same jump 10 times in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, yeah, like they're clearly like training for something. Yeah. So it's like, what are you training for? And the first time they asked me that kind of put me in an existential crisis from like, I don't know. Like, what am I? I was like, well, like I make videos. I was like, what? I was like, I do it for fun.
Yeah.
That's just, it's fun. Mm-hmm. Like I love it. It's amazing. It gives me passion with everything else. I can put it all back. Like it's just giving. It's always inspiring me to improve. But it's just fun.
Yeah. And we always say at the end of the day, regardless of what sport you're in or what hobby you're in, what, department you're in, like it's all supposed to be fun. And like, really that's all we're trying to do here. Like, but it keeps you motivated. It keeps you disciplined. Like it will keep you, okay, I know that there's this big challenge that I want. I don't have the leg strength for it. So I'm going to go, really focus on that in the gym. Or, pretty recently you had a little bit of an ankle injury. Like it kept you making sure that you were rehabbing and prehabbing and doing all of these things. So it was just giving you something to work towards. And do you post it on social media? Yeah, you get really good interactions. Like you have so many cool friends and people in your life that you've gotten through parkour. But like, I just want to do it because it's kind of cool. Like it's just fun at that point. And when it's a nice sunny day, finally in Cleveland, we're getting some of those. Like you get to go outside and train. And like that's what it's all about. Exactly. And like I always say that, a lot of my gymnasts that I work with this week, they're all heading to regionals and they're stressed out and whatever. And I keep reminding them like, hey, it's supposed to be fun. Like I love gymnastics more than most things in life, but like it's just gymnastics. It's just doing flips at the end of the day. And like that's all it needs to be sometimes. There's so much hard work that goes into it and so much advancement and pride you can take. But like
there's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of times where I'm not enjoying it in the moment.
Yeah.
But that's life.
Yeah.
And like I'm just happy to be alive, and I'm happy that I do have opportunities to do things that make me happy, and I am happy that I'm able to find avenues where I can apply it into other aspects of my life as well.
Exactly. And I think it's just one of those where, there doesn't have to be this big profound why behind what you do.
But I think it's good to have something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Period.
Whatever that is.
And I think it's good to have something that can keep you wanting to improve.
Yeah.
And grow and change, because that's kind of the whole point, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I've noticed with like someone like a Dom Tomato, where he's not the same guy that he was 5 years ago when he was like quote unquote at his peak when he hit IMAX. Not at his peak, but like he's training different. He's the way that he sees parkour and the way that he puts out media is different because he's growing and he's looking at different ways to do it. And he's like, sure, he's probably contradicting against himself versus what he used to say about YouTube videos and whatever. But you're allowed to change your opinion.
I was going to say, and you can say that for your whole career, I want to go play D1 basketball. Okay, that can change, and I just want to play club. Or, hey, I thought this was a sport I wanted to do. This isn't what I want to do anymore. I want to change to a different sport, or I just want to do this for fun. I don't necessarily need it to be at this highest competitive level. it's allowed to change, it's allowed to evolve. All of those skills and processes and, you know, the other skills that you learn from sports, from the mental and physical side, are going to translate to other things that you're doing. And so, you know, we always say, like, it all connects. It all, school and sports and life and all of it all comes full circle. And because it's fun is a perfectly acceptable, if not the best answer for what are you training for? Because I want to have fun.
It seems too simple. It's like, oh, like it's just for fun. But like really when you are passionate about it and you can carry it through with other things, that's a great motivation for it. And then you find yourself in positions where you can push yourself more, and you are able to look at the positive side of it no matter what, where there's people who they take themselves very seriously and they're very strict about how they do things, and so they can beat themselves up about when they don't get something that they like. Where when I go out, even if I am motivated by an online competition where I could win money, I still am like, okay, like I want to have fun. Like, okay, I'm stressed out about this challenge. I want my other buddy to also be there to film. Like I only have one guy. I want two there. Yeah. So I'm going to wait for him. Hey, like, can we play a game of add-on? Like, let's do something where like I can like chill out for a minute and like not stress.
Right.
And then you want to keep having, you always, just you want to have fun.
I know. And it's one of those, you know, it's hard work, but it can be fun at the same time.
And so if I have a challenge and I go, okay, like if I don't get this, like maybe I can look at this as well. Like I'm trying to set myself up for success in different ways to keep myself passionate. Like I don't want to walk away feeling salty towards it. And I don't want to finish off the day on a bad note. Like, okay, like let's go somewhere where I know I'll at least enjoy myself a little bit before I have to go home. Right. And, you know, not have to beat yourself up about it. Like you're not any less of a person when you do have a bad day. I think of your nephew at the National Hockey Championships.
Oh, heck yeah. Shout out to Milo.
That was awesome.
We were proud aunt and uncle on that one.
But they lost.
Badly.
Very quickly.
Sorry.
But like just an amazing opportunity, and like for us to look at it, like this is so cool. Yeah. Like national championships, and like they get to go up against the big guys. Like this is awesome.
These little South Carolina boys playing Nebraska. Guess who won? Right?
Yeah, Nebraska. But just so amazing.
But you know, and you know, this will be kind of the last thing. Then we'll wrap it up. But like I think this is another good thing where it was just fun. You know, they were down. Goalie got hurt. Milo has not played goalie in 4+ years, you know, whatever. And he was like, okay, we don't have a goalie. Put me in net. Like, I'll figure it out. And like, he held his own. And he goes, I don't know. I wanted to do it for my team. And it was fun. And like, that's all it's supposed to be. And
because how exciting would that be to be goalie for the first time, just like in the middle of a game? Like,
right. Like
that's crazy.
Yeah, right. There was open net. Like, it was this whole thing. But I think that's just another one of those things of like, you know, why did you do this? Because it was fun, and that's all it needs to be. And he, you know, he figured it out. And I think that's just a good message to whoever it is in whatever context they're in.
And keep these routines to make sure that you can not end on a bad note during it, to make sure that you can stay positive and to not say, I can't. Yeah, exactly. That's something that kids really try to, like, they can very quickly write themselves off and say, I can't. And it's easy to say that, and it's easy to look at something and say that there's no way. But like, I jump off of buildings. Yeah. So like, if I can jump off of a building, like I can interact with this person at the bank. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, you know, lots of good things to take from it. You know, build your process, refine your process. You know, it can, you know, these mental skills that we always talk about apply to sports, but they apply in so many other less traditional athletic contexts and, you know, just life in general. So, and change is good. Yeah, change is good. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast and letting me drag you here. I think it was cool. It's just a cool perspective. And, you know, these are the conversations that, you know, when I get home from work, you get home from work, this is what we're talking about. And, you know, you get home from a day of training, I'm, you know, home from a day of whatever it is I'm doing. Like, these are the conversations that we have. So I think it was cool to kind of do it in a formal. It was just another conversation. Yeah, this is pretty much what it's like in the Goff house. So these conversations. Yeah. So, well, cool. Thanks for coming. Thank you. Sweet. If you like what you're listening to, be sure to follow the Athlete Cafe on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. You can find us wherever you enjoy listening to your podcasts.